Yella Beezy's rap lyrics are now at the center of a murder trial. Facing capital murder charges in Mo3's death, his defense argues lyrics are characters, not confessions. They're pointing to Rick Ross's famous persona as proof. So how is a decades-old hip-hop contradiction being used in court? Keep watching to see why this argument could decide his fate. Let's start where the story actually is. A Dallas courtroom this month with a rapper's freedom on the line. Yella Beezy, whose legal name is Marquise Conway, sat through a multi-day pre-trial hearing that focused on whether prosecutors can use his song lyrics as evidence in his upcoming murder-for-hire trial involving the 2020 death of rival rapper Mo3. This isn't a side issue. This is the fight that could decide whether a jury ever hears his music at all. Here's what prosecutors are working with. Detective Eric Barnes testified that throughout the feud between the rappers, Yella Beezy allegedly said in a song he put a bounty on the head of Mo3. Barnes didn't stop there. He told the court his team went looking for a confession the old-fashioned way, and it didn't work. We want a first-person narration in this investigation because of the keep it in the street motto. We weren't able to get that in an interrogation room. We had to go to YouTube to get it. We had to go to social media to get it, said Detective Barnes. He put it plainly, the crime, in his telling, wasn't solved through cooperation with police. Instead, it was monetized through songs and carried out further, and inflamed through music and social media posts. That's one voice in this. Barnes isn't guessing about which songs he means either. He named them specifically. Detective Eric Barnes pointed to lyrics in the songs Hitters, Keep It in the Streets, and On Your Head, testifying that they referenced paying for violence and putting money on someone's head. He also drew a line between the music and a live show, saying the alleged shooter, Keiwan White, appeared on stage with Conway at a concert shortly before Noble's murder, which Barnes said showed White was trusted by Conway. Prosecutors have since put it in writing. Court filings show Dallas County prosecutors filed an amended notice of extraneous evidence on February 17. In the capital murder case against rapper Yella Beezy, born Marquise Conway, outlining prior criminal acts, gang ties, social media posts, and rap music. They want admitted when he goes to trial for the 2020 murder of Mo3. 4 songs made the list. 4 of Conway's songs are on the list: Keep It in the Streets, On Ya Head, Take 3, and Gassed Up. Prosecutors say the lyrics are directly tied to the ongoing feud that led to Mo3 getting shot and killed on a Dallas freeway on November 11, 2020. 2 of those tracks weren't even released to the public. They surfaced somewhere prosecutors didn't expect. 2 of those songs, Take 3 and Gassed Up, were reportedly found in text messages Conway allegedly sent to a co-defendant the day of the murder. So that's the weight sitting on one side of the scale. Music, texts, a stage appearance, a detective who spent years chasing a bounty. He says was bragged about in rhyme. Now here's the other voice, the defense, and the argument they built to fight all of it. They didn't just say these are just lyrics and hope a judge agreed. They brought in an academic who spent his career on exactly this fight. Yella Beezy's defense team called upon Dr. Eric Nielsen, a University of Richmond professor who specializes in the legal implications of rap lyrics in criminal cases. Nielsen's whole testimony rested on one idea, that rappers build characters, not diaries. Dr. Nielsen explained that rappers often create exaggerated personas for entertainment that blur the line between fiction and reality. And he didn't just say it in the abstract. He pointed the court toward exactly what kind of persona he meant. He plays a character named Yella Beezy, Nielsen said, describing how the performance blurs with reality in ways that confuse people unfamiliar with the genre's conventions, to make that idea land with a jury who might have never listened to a rap album in their life. Nielsen reached for a comparison that's been used in courtrooms and classrooms for years: professional wrestling. Nielsen compared rappers to professional wrestlers, explaining that both create larger-than-life personas designed to entertain rather than document real events. Under oath, he put it in his own words. He compared rappers to wrestlers and warned that using lyrics in a trial could unfairly bias the jury. And this is where Rick Ross's story becomes the sharpest tool in that argument. Not because he showed up in the courtroom, but because his career is the single most cited real-world proof that a rap persona and a rapper's actual biography can be 2 completely different things. Ross built an entire identity, an entire catalog, around being a cocaine kingpin. He named himself after a real Los Angeles drug trafficker. He rapped about moving weight, running product, living the life of a boss in the game. And for years, the wider public believed every word of it was memoir. It wasn't. Rick Ross, born William Leonard Roberts II, worked as a corrections officer before he ever had a platinum record. William Leonard Roberts II, born January 28, 1976, known professionally as Rick Ross, is an American rapper and music executive. He built an influential figure in modern hip-hop music. Rick Ross has become known for his booming vocal performance, larger-than-life persona, and vivid lyrical imagery. And that persona, that vivid imagery of street life, is exactly the kind of construction Nielsen was describing to the court when he said rappers play characters. His lyrics form the hardships of street life and black market economic activity into a rags-to-riches narrative, often describing affluence, wealth, and luxury. That's the whole argument in miniature. If a man who once wore a badge for a living can convince millions of people he was a drug lord through nothing but bars and a booming voice, then why would anyone assume Yella Beezy's lyrics are a documentary either? That's the logic the defense wants a jury to sit with before a single song gets played in that courtroom. But Nielsen didn't stop at persona. He brought data. He told the court that studies show audiences don't treat rap lyrics the same way they treat lyrics from other genres. Even when the words are identical, people found rap lyrics to be far more literal than the exact same lyrics characterized as country, he testified, citing one study. And he laid out exactly why that matters for a jury, deciding a man's life. If they're saying, I did this or I did that, it can sound like straight confession. It's a perfect way to send people to jail for something they did not do. That's three distinct voices already on record in this case. Barnes for the state, Nielsen for the defense, and the prosecution's own paper trail, laying out the specific evidence they've assembled. Every one of them is fighting over the same four walls. Does a song get to testify against the man who wrote it? To understand why any of this lyric fight matters, you have to go back to where the actual beef started, because none of this happened in a vacuum. This wasn't two strangers who ended up on opposite sides of a courtroom. This was a rivalry that had years to build before anyone died. The origin point, according to reporting on the case, traces back to 2017, and a fight that had nothing to do with music at first. The conflict supposedly started in 2017 when comedian Roy Pate questioned whether Yella Beezy was really from Dallas, leading to an assault, then Pate's shooting death in 2018. Then Yella Beezy getting shot on a tollway, and finally Mo3's execution-style killing on Interstate 35E in November 2020. Read that timeline again, slowly, because it's the whole case in one sentence. A comedian questions Beezy's Dallas credentials. That comedian ends up shot dead. Beezy himself gets shot on a tollway, and 3 years later, Mo3, whose real name was Melvin Noble, is killed on a highway in what prosecutors call an execution. That's the backdrop the lyrics sit inside. Prosecutors aren't just pointing at random verses and calling them confessions. They're pointing at songs that dropped during a specific, violent, escalating feud between two artists who had every reason to want each other gone. That context is why Detective Barnes leaned so hard into hitters and on your head in his testimony, because to the state, those songs aren't art commentary on street life in the abstract. They're aimed at a specific person during a specific war. And the state has more than just old feud history. Prosecutors have laid out a chain that goes well past the music itself. Kiwan Dontrell White and Devin Maurice Brown Jr. face charges as co-defendants, with White accused of being the actual shooter. That's not persona, that's an actual name, an actual co-defendant, an actual allegation of who pulled the trigger on an actual freeway. The violence didn't stop with Mo3 either. It rippled outward and touched other names in hip-hop that most casual fans would recognize. Prosecutors state they plan to introduce Beezy's lyrics and social media posts as evidence, alleging they point to involvement in Mo3's death, as well as the 2020 shooting of Boosie Badazz. Days after Mo3's death, Boosie traveled to Dallas to pay his respects to his friend, and was later shot in the leg, according to reports. So now you've got a second shooting, a second victim, and prosecutors say it's connected to the same feud, the same motive, potentially the same defendant. Prosecutors have also accused Beezy of hiring Dontrell White in connection with the highway shooting that left Mo3 dead. Beezy's side has never wavered on one point through all of this. Beezy has denied any involvement in either shooting. He's maintained that position through arrest, through house arrest, through delay after delay in getting to trial. And the delays have been real and human, not just legal maneuvering. His legal team has requested that his trial be pushed back to Feb 2, following the passing of his mother, A man facing a possible death sentence, watching his mother pass away, while he's confined to a house waiting for a courtroom date, is not an abstraction. That's a real weight sitting on top of an already crushing legal situation. Beezy's confinement itself tells you how seriously the state is treating this. Rapper Yella Beezy has been on house arrest since March 2025, awaiting trial. Not jail, but not freedom either. A man boxed into his own home while lawyers argue over which of his songs a jury gets to hear. And the stakes on the other end of this are as high as it gets in the American legal system. If convicted, Yella Beezy faces life in prison without parole, or potentially the death penalty under Texas capital murder statutes. If convicted on the capital murder charge, Yella Beezy faces life in prison. Prosecutors, for their part, insist the lyrics are just one piece of a much bigger pile. They've said publicly they're not resting their whole case on bars from a mixtape. Prosecutors insist that the case against Yella Beezy is built on a substantial amount of evidence beyond his music. This includes witness statements, physical evidence, intercepted communications, and social media activity, all of which they argue support the charges against him. So you've got two competing pictures. One side says, look at everything else we have. The witnesses, the phones, the posts, the songs are just the cherry on top of an already loaded case. The other side says the lyrics are the most dangerous piece of all because juries will hear Bounty and On Your Head and stop listening to anything else. That tension, a mountain of separate evidence versus 4 specific songs that could poison how a jury reads all of it, is exactly why the persona argument matters so much. It's not really about proving Beezy is innocent of everything. It's about making sure 12 people in a box don't convict him because a verse sounded cool and menacing on a track. Now let's get into the actual mechanics of the argument the defense is using, because this isn't the first time in America this fight has happened, and it's not close to being settled. The core legal question boils down to something surprisingly simple. Can the government use somebody's art against them in a criminal trial, the same way it would use a text message or a phone call? Nielsen's answer to the court was no, not without serious risk of convicting the wrong person for the wrong reason. He tied his warning to something bigger than just one case. Nielsen from the University of Richmond testified that prosecutors want to use Yella Beezy's songs as evidence, but jurors without hip-hop literacy could easily misread bars as admissions of guilt. His research digs into exactly why that misreading happens so consistently. Nielsen's research shows that academic studies prove people interpret violent rap lyrics as literal confessions, far more often than they would identical lyrics labeled as country or rock music. And he went a step further into territory that a lot of legal commentators have flagged for years, the racial dynamics sitting underneath all of this. There's also a racial component. Jurors might unconsciously apply stereotypes about black men being inherently violent, making them more likely to believe rap lyrics reflect actual criminal intent. This isn't a new fight for the genre either. Hip-hop has been dragged into courtrooms across the country over and over, and the pattern keeps repeating. The YSL RICO case against Young Thug allowed 17 sets of rap lyrics as evidence, while Lil Durk's ongoing murder for hire trial has prosecutors fighting to use his music despite judicial skepticism. Young Thug's case became a national conversation about exactly this question. Durk's ongoing case is proof that this fight isn't cooling off. It's spreading. And Texas specifically has already had a moment where an appeals court looked back at a conviction and said the state went too far. In 2024, the state's Court of Criminal Appeals overturned a capital murder conviction, specifically because prosecutors improperly weaponized rap videos and lyrics. That's not a defense attorney's opinion. That's an actual appellate ruling in the same state where Yella Beezy is now standing trial, a real precedent hanging over this exact hearing. That's the legal skeleton behind the persona defense. But the cultural skeleton, the thing that makes it land with a courtroom or an audience at home, is names like Rick Ross. Ross isn't just a random example plucked out of thin air. He's the textbook case, cited in academic papers, cited in legal arguments, cited in journalism about this exact subject for close to 2 decades, because his entire public identity was built on a lie that turned out to be commercially brilliant. He rapped about being a boss, about running product, about a life of high-stakes crime, while his actual background before fame was law enforcement adjacent, not criminal. His music painted the hardships of street life and black market economic activity into a rags-to-riches narrative, often describing affluence, wealth, and luxury. A narrative built for entertainment, matched against a real biography that looked completely different. That's precisely the gap. Nielsen was describing to the court when he talked about rappers playing characters that blur the line between fiction and reality. Ross didn't invent that gap, but he's the most famous living proof that the gap exists and that it can exist at the very top of the genre, selling millions of records without a single element of it being real crime. Nielsen's wrestling comparison works the same way. Nobody watches a wrestling match and assumes the guy getting body slammed is actually being assaulted. Everybody understands the character on screen is separate from the human being underneath the gimmick. Nielsen's argument to the court is that rap deserves that same separation, that a boss persona on a track is a performance choice, not a diary entry. In the same way, a wrestling villain isn't actually a villain outside the ring. The prosecution's counter to all of this is straightforward, and it's worth taking seriously too. Their position is that Beezy's songs aren't generic tough talk aimed at nobody in particular. They're aimed by name and by context at a real rival, during a real feud with real violence attached on both ends. Barnes' testimony about hitters and On Your Head wasn't about persona at all. It was about specificity. Songs that dropped mid-feud, mentioning bounties, following an actual shooting and preceding an actual killing. To the state, that's not a wrestling storyline. That's a paper trail set to a beat. That's the actual fight happening in that Dallas courtroom right now. And it's the same fight America's courts have been having about rap music for the better part of a decade, just with new names attached each time. So where does all of this actually leave Yella Beezy? And what happens next? The pre-trial hearing itself dragged on far longer than most cases like this typically do. Every case is unique, but it is not common for a pre-trial hearing to last multiple days. The court has wrapped up for the day. The judge is calling both sides back on Tuesday, and the trial is scheduled for next month. That length alone tells you how seriously both sides and the judge are treating the lyrics question. Nobody's rushing this ruling. The trial date itself has become almost a moving target throughout this whole process. Delayed for grief, delayed for legal argument. The trial is scheduled for August 24, 2026. Whatever the judge decides about those 4 songs will shape almost everything that follows once testimony actually begins. If the lyrics get in, prosecutors get to play Take 3 and Gassed Up and On Your Head in front of a jury, alongside the story of how 2 of those tracks turned up in text messages sent the day of the killing. If the lyrics get thrown out, the state has to build its entire case around witness statements, physical evidence, intercepted communications, and social media activity. The exact evidence prosecutors have said all along they're relying on regardless. Either way, the ruling on those songs is being watched by more than just the people in that courtroom. Every artist currently facing a similar situation, Dirk, and every rapper who's ever written a verse about violence, has a stake in how a Texas judge rules on whether Yella Beezy's persona defense holds up. A ruling in Beezy's favor strengthens the argument Nielsen made from the stand. A ruling against him hands prosecutors nationwide a fresh example to point to. The next time they want a rapper's own words read back to a jury. And underneath all of the legal maneuvering, there's still a family on the other side of this. Mo3's mother lost a son on a Dallas freeway in an execution-style shooting. Boosie survived being shot in the leg after simply traveling to pay respects to a friend who'd been killed. Those are real consequences sitting behind every argument about personas and fiction and wrestling comparisons. The legal fight over lyrics doesn't erase what happened on that highway in November of 2020. It just determines how and whether a jury gets to hear the soundtrack the state says was playing in the background the whole time. Yella Beezy, for his part, has stayed consistent through every stage of this: denial, house arrest, the loss of his mother, a delayed trial date, and now a fight over whether his own songs get to testify against him. Nothing about the last several months of his life has been ordinary, and nothing about the months ahead will be either. So bring it back to where this whole thing started: Rick Ross, and why his name keeps surfacing every time this exact argument gets made in a courtroom. Ross's career remains the go-to reference point for exactly the kind of defense Nielsen mounted in Dallas, because nothing else in the genre so cleanly separates the performer from the persona. A man built an empire. Ross founded the record label Maybach Music Group in 2008, through which he has signed artists including Meek Mill, Wale, French Montana, and Omarion, among others, entirely on the strength of a character he invented. He took his name from a real trafficker, wrote verses about moving weight and running cities, and built one of the most commercially successful catalogs in modern rap, on the back of a story that, biographically, wasn't his own life at all. That's exactly the point Nielsen was trying to plant in the jury pool's head without ever mentioning Ross by name, that the loudest, most convincing boss persona in the history of the genre belonged to a man whose actual background looked nothing like his lyrics. If audiences could be fooled that thoroughly, for that long about one of the most famous rappers alive, then assuming any rapper's lyrics are a factual account starts to look less like common sense, and more like a mistake courts have made too many times already. That's not to say prosecutors in the Beezy case are wrong to look hard at his music. Detective Barnes wasn't reaching when he tied specific songs to a specific feud, with a specific person who ended up dead. Context matters, timing matters. Text messages sent the day of a murder, carrying the exact titles of songs, prosecutors say reference that murder, matter. Nobody's pretending those details evaporate just because Nielsen invoked a wrestling analogy on the stand. What the Ross comparison actually offers is a caution, not an acquittal. It's a reminder that the same industry that turns invented street personas into platinum plaques can also turn real threats into songs that sound almost identical to the fiction. Telling the two apart isn't something a jury can do by ear alone. That's the entire argument the defense built its case around. And it's the entire reason a university professor spent hours on a witness stand, talking about wrestling gimmicks instead of murder weapons. Where this leaves things, heading toward a trial date, is genuinely unresolved. The judge hasn't ruled. The songs might play in that courtroom or they might not. Either way, Yella Beezy is still sitting under house arrest, still carrying a capital murder charge, still waiting on a date that's already been pushed once because of a death in his own family. Mo3's family is still waiting for whatever a courtroom can offer them by way of an answer. And Rick Ross's decades-old persona, cocaine kingpin on record, corrections officer in real life, is still doing legal work today that it was never written to do, standing in for an argument about where art ends and evidence begins. Nobody in that Dallas courtroom is pretending this is simple. The songs are real. The feud was real. The shootings were real. Whether the words on those tracks get to speak for themselves in front of a jury is still, as of now, an open question. And it's one more court in Texas is about to have to answer.